early morning inside a pastry shop in the streets of the Song Dynasty, the shopkeeper sat calmly behind the counter. Young apprentice Aiken, dressed in short working clothes, was learning to make osmanthus cakes from a senior helper. He was flustered and clumsy. Kneading the dough was uneven strength. His dough turned out either too hard or too runny, and his face was filled with impatience. In the morning, the shopkeeper walked around and saw that Aiken's osmanthus cakes were lopsided in shape, and some were even burnt. He picked up the pastries, pointed out the flaws, and told Aiken to make them again. Yet Aiken looked displeased, muttered quietly to himself, complaining that the flour was poor and the fire too strong, refusing to admit his own mistakes. The shopkeeper gestured for Aiken to watch the helper beside him. The helper's movements were skillful. His osmanthus cakes were golden in color and neat, lie-shaped. They used exactly the same flour and fire. Still, Aiken grew more dissatisfied. He grumbled that fate was unfair, claiming he was simply not born to make pastries well, and insisted the helper only succeeded by luck. At noon, while the helper rested, Aiken stayed alone in the kitchen and tried making osmanthus cakes again. Still, he made a complete mess. Frustrated, he slammed the dough onto the table and kept complaining to the helper. He blamed the shopkeeper for being too strict, said the helper would not teach earnestly, and even grumbled that the stuffy kitchen ruined his touch. He never reflected on his own unskilled technique. Looking at his burnt, misshapen cakes, Aiken felt dejected, yet he kept blaming heaven and everyone else. He banged on the table, complaining about his bad luck, lamenting that he could not even master such a simple craft. He shifted all blame onto others, never realizing the problem lay in his own awkward skills and lack of dedication. As customers grew more numerous in the afternoon, the shopkeeper saw that Aiken was still complaining endless lie instead of learning. Earnestly, he called Aiken over and advised him patiently, when facing difficulties, one should not blame others or fate, but first reflect on oneself. Still, Aiken looked unconvinced and kept making excuses. The shopkeeper took some flour, demonstrated kneading and shaping, and explained the quality of pastries does not depend on the flour or the fire, nor on luck. It depends entirely on whether one puts in effort and practices diligently. He warned Aiken never to blame heaven and others, but to look for shortcomings within himself. At dusk, Aiken returned to the kitchen, staring at the beautiful lie-made osmanthus cakes prepared by the helper. He recalled the shopkeeper's words. He finally calmed it down and stopped complaining. He began to reflect. His technique was clumsy, he lacked focus, and he refused to ask humbly for advice. He picked up the flour, kneaded and shaped it slowly, his expression gradually turning peaceful. Aiken brought his newly made osmanthus cakes to ask the shopkeeper for guidance, though not perfect. They were much neater than before and free of burns. The shopkeeper looked approving, praised his progress publicly, and said that only by ceasing to blame others and reflecting on himself could he improve so quickly. That night, sitting in the kitchen and comparing his past and present osmanthus cakes, Aiken finally understood the harm of blaming heaven and others. He realized that complaining about fate and other people whenever difficulties arise leads now here. Only by reflecting on himself and practicing hard could he make progress. He picked up the flour once more and continued practicing earnestly. Moonlight spilled into the ancient pastry shop. The shopkeeper, Aiken, and the helper sat together. Aiken shared his realization, and the shopkeeper further explained the true meaning of the idiom. This is blaming heaven and others. It means complaining about fate and blaming other people whenever setbacks come, while never reflecting on one's own faults. It reminds us to take responsibility bravely and examine ourselves in difficult times, so that we may keep growing and improving.